Hello, welcome to Secure the Continent and News Central Television. I am Gbenga Aborowa. This is the program where we bring you up to date with all the security happenings and situations on the African continent. Before we delve into our main topic of discussion today, let me first bring you the latest security headlines across Africa. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is on a mediation mission to Ukraine. Sudan's governor killed after accusing the paramilitary rapid support forces of committing genocide. Human Rights Watch accuses M23 rebels of rape and finds graves in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And also, Mali military leaders meet over constitutional referendum ahead of elections. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Just over a decade ago, Kenya fought tooth and nail to defeat the advancing nemesis of Al-Shabab terrorists from Somalia, a battle which was fought and won. There now seems to be a resurgence as 8 Kenyan policemen were killed by an improvised explosive device in a suspected Al-Shabab attack. There are details for you in this intro package. Take a listen.
History, they say, repeats itself. But every country desires never to be on the wrong end of history. Just over a decade ago, Kenya fought tooth and nail to defeat the advancing nemesis of Al-Shabab terrorists from Somalia. But with the government which fought that battle and won now gone, the old foes are back in town. Northern Kenya has become the devil's playground for one of the world's most daredevil terrorists. 8 Kenyan policemen are the latest casualties of a vicious terrorist attack, and with Somalia successfully pushing its greatest enemies out, Kenya, just across the border, has to deal with the effects of violence and terrorism. The government of President William Ruto must work its fingers to the bone to make a sweeping charge against its foremost enemies. Perhaps it needs to ask the previous government of Uhuru Kenyatta, which the current leader was a part of, about how it nailed the terrorists' coffin and pushed them back to base. Such sordid times require urgent steps to solve a problem that can send the nation on its knees and peg its progress back. Al-Shabab may recruit forces along the youthful northern Kenyan lines, and there's much more to gain than lose if the government makes a swift, solid, and smart response. A stitch in time will not just save 9, it will make the country the peaceful place it is again and save Kenya from its current ordeal.
Joining me tonight on the program, I have Emil Kovacs, a risk analyst and CEO of Risk Solutions Africa, is joining us live from Bamako in Mali. I also have the pleasure of having Brigadier General Ahamed, Muhammed, retired as senior advisor of Defense and Security at the Horn Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. One welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me on the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, I'd like to start with General Muhammed. In light of the recent attacks on Kenyan police officers by Al-Shabab, what are the implications for the overall security situation in Kenya, particularly in the border region with Somalia, northern Kenya?
Thank you very much for having me. Let me just say that what we are seeing is a continuation of what was going on before. Nothing much serious, only that we normally have incursions that come in. And what they normally do is they avoid direct engagement and normally lay IEDs, which then will be hit security forces along those areas for patrolling and preventing them from crossing over into Kenya. So really, no face-to-face engagement, much more of attacks that are covered through IEDs and maybe ambushes where they may meet accidentally.
So it's more of a cat and mouse type of situation that we're witnessing right now.
Yes, as you know, much more in Somalia. When Al-Shabab goes for attack, they plan well and they go for a massive attack, normally with over maybe 300 soldiers. Now, in terms of crossover into Kenya, that has never happened. It happened only with forces in Somalia. But in Kenya, what we have is maybe ID attacks or small attacks, whereby they try and avoid security forces unless they meet accidentally.
But so are you, General, staying with you, are you trying to say that Al-Shabaab's capacity has been degraded to a level that they cannot carry out a Garissa University type or Westgate Mall type of attacks within Kenyan territory any longer?
Remember, Westgate was isolated, where they bring about 10 people undercover, come and meet in the capital, and then plan and undertake the attack. But in terms of the attacks in northeastern Kenya, it is much more of ambushes, much more of IEDs and avoidance of direct engagement. That's what it is.
Thank you, General. I'd like to bring Emil in Bamako into the conversation. Thank you very much for joining the program, Emil. Now, how has Al-Shabaab's prolonged presence and insurgency in Somalia directly impacted Kenya's efforts to maintain security and stability in the country? And we've seen the pressure the government of Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, the new president of Kenya, has put on Al-Shabaab. Is there a direct correlation between the pressure in Somalia and these recent resurgence, to so to speak of, in Kenya?
Yeah, greetings. Assalamu alaikum, Excellency. So now in Kenya, it changed the security context as the new government took oath and took office. And as we can see also that, real hardened and long career intelligence officer was named at the National Intelligence Service. So again, also President Ruto has a total different approach what regarding Al-Shabaab activities in Kenya. Al-Shabaab is still capable for conflicting attacks, as also His Excellency has expressed, to conduct like the Westgate type of attacks. But they have to organize quite well, which they have the capability, and also they have the capacity. But also we have to see now the recent developments, also regarding the US government approach with the redeployment of forces in Somalia, and also existing security cooperations, for example, like Kenya, which has with long-standing defense cooperation with US, UK, Turkey, Qatar, UAE, which are now behind Kenya to enhance their defense capability and also intelligence and quick reaction forces, so that they can tackle the incoming threat insurgency in the eastern regions such as Mandera, Wajir, Lamu, and Garissa.
Thank you, Emil. Now, General Muhammed, one of Al-Shabaab's grouses against Kenya is the presence of Kenyan groups, the presence of Kenyan boots on the ground in Somalia. They say they want their territory to be free of Kenyan military personnel. Can you provide a comprehensive analysis of Kenya's military involvement in Somalia since 2011? What were the initial objectives and how have they evolved over time?
Well, thank you very much. You will realize that for a long time, the concept has been that neighbors don't take part in peacekeeping in the neighboring countries. And as much as there were issues in Somalia, way back, Kenya was safe and remained an island of peace. However, about a decade ago, when there was much more crisis in Somalia, mainly for the south, in Jubaland and Kismayu, we found actually operations conducted by Al-Shabaab along our coastline around the period of about 10 years ago. And they did kidnap a number of tourists who were in hotels along the coast. We thought it was isolated, but this went on for a while. And Kenya found it very hard to allow it to continue. And therefore, out of that, Kenya felt the need to intervene by attacking Al-Shabaab close to the border. This was done, but eventually it was found that their strong base was Kismayu, and therefore Kenyans felt that they need to nail this once and for all, and therefore go for their base in Kismayu, which they did. And indeed, in 2012, Kenya was able to capture Kismayu, the main base of Al-Shabab in the south. And it was then that the AU requested Kenya if they could stay on as part of AMISOM in Somalia, which Kenya did give in, and therefore Kenya became part of AMISOM officially around that time. Now, after that, we did indeed see a number of attacks in Nairobi, isolated like the Westgate, and a few in the north. Nothing much, again, as I said, in terms of direct engagement, face-to-face with the troops. They still went on avoiding our troops in Kenya, but looking for what I may call isolated targets in Kenya and in Somalia. Now, since then, Kenya has remained in Somalia. Kenya has contained the situation in Jubaland and particularly in Kismayu, although we still find Al-Shabab strongholds in certain parts of Somalia. It's this group that still finds a chance now to conduct incursions into Somalia along the border in northeastern. Again, avoiding direct engagement with security forces. They go for well-picked out targets, they attack and leave immediately. In terms of direct attacks, it's not really what is going on here. They avoid that as much as possible. And therefore, what Kenya has done is to remain alert, to maintain their forces in Somalia under ATMIS now, and also to provide forces to secure our border with Somalia to avoid those incursions. Thank you.
Now, staying with you, General, you did mention that, you know, the terrorists, the Al-Shabab, they avoid direct confrontation with Kenyan security forces. And I guess that's the modus operandi of a terrorist organization. They hit and run, they use asymmetrical tactics. How has the Kenyan security forces been able to evolve intelligence gathering? Have they been able to have specific countermeasures to stop this hit and run attacks? Because some of them do have quite a number of casualties, even though we haven't seen something at the scale of Garissa or Westgate.
I should say that in terms of intelligence, Kenya is way ahead of the game. And indeed, they have been very proactive in terms of preempting possible attacks. What we see are much more of isolated cases. A lot of them have been preempted, cleared, and kept silent over time. Indeed, with cooperation from Somalia and our international partners, we have been actually on top of things in terms of getting intelligence. And as I said earlier, preempting attacks. These are not very much normally announced, but a lot of it has been done very well. So that indeed, what we have as attacks, therefore, remain isolated in terms of IED and maybe attacks on villages. On the whole, I would say 90% of those attacks have been preempted and dealt with accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Now, Emil, AMISOM, the African Union mission in Somalia, has transformed to African Union Transmission Mission in Somalia, ATMIS. How much of a difference has that made in their operability, and in light of the recent attacks on the ATMIS base in Bulo Mare, what measures are being taken to bolster the security and protection of AU forces operating in Somalia? That was a very terrible attack. I believe up to 50 Ugandan servicemen lost their lives in that brazen attack by Al-Shabab.
Yeah, still ATMIS is struggling actually to get the connection and also to make a good foothold with the locals, as in civil-military relations with the local Somalis, because they have really challenges in this forward operating bases, as we saw the last attack on the Ugandan base. So it didn't change much. I think they wanted to have give some local ownership to the Somali government, to the FGS, and they tried to transform and to make it more attractive towards local, to have much more positive interaction with them. But for the moment being, it's still present. Now the Americans are back, the EU international community is funding, UN is there. So they still have support, but what we saw on the field, it's still quite limited. So the change, for your question, it didn't come yet.
So it's just mere semantics, just a change in name, but it hasn't led to a difference in resort for ATMIS. Thank you, Emil. Now, back to you, General Muhammed. What are the underlying factors that makes the northeastern region of Kenya particularly vulnerable to Al-Shabab attacks? Are there specific socioeconomic, geographic, or historical reasons for this vulnerability?
Well, don't forget that in terms of the area, the northeastern part of Kenya is occupied by Somalis, who therefore have their cousins across in Somalia. The same happens on the southeastern part of Ethiopia, Ogaden region, which again is occupied by Somalis. And therefore, when these troops come around, when Al-Shabab come around, you can't tell who is who. When they are unarmed, they're able to filter in through society, take advantage of the language, take advantage of religion, and be able to do what they are doing, sometimes even being fed by locals out of fear, not because they want to do it, out of fear. And therefore, the fact that that element is there, and the terrain is the same across the entire area, no difference, hot, dry areas with isolated facilities, and towns across the way. Therefore, all that and the closeness to Somalia makes it very convenient for them to pop in and out, conduct small raids, and get out as they wish. And these are things that we are trying to do right now in terms of sensitizing the people to report any incidents, to report any arrivals, to report any information, so that this can be dealt with appropriately and on time.
Thank you, General. Now, Emil, could you provide a detailed overview of previous major attacks carried out by Al-Shabab in Kenya, such as Westgate Mall siege and the attack on Garissa University? I believe this led to Kenya deploying Kenyan Defense Forces boots on the ground in Somalia. What is the status of that deployment? Is there a timeline for when they will return? And how have these incidents influenced Kenya's approach to counterterrorism?
Thank you for the question. Kenya's counterterrorism approach is already changed, as I said before, with the new government, because now, for example, the intelligence chief, he totally changed the tactic, for example, the recruitment, that it should be more inclusive from much more, ethnical backgrounds, and also much more investment in modern technology, and also better youth care for active serving officers, which it's a starting project, but it will have bear his fruits in the long run if it continued like that. For the last major attack, which was very notable, was the Camp Simpa attack on US forces, where Al-Shabab attempted and also actually killed one soldier and one contractor and injured a number of people. So that was one of the last major, so to say, which attracted attention, beside the operations and insurgencies carried out in Mogadishu and across the western lower part of Somalia. But so far, they have been also during the last presidential elections, informations that they may try to target to get some attention and also to commit Westgate-style attacks in the capital, which luckily also did not occur, and also it was a good number of deployed forces during that period, and also in the eastern regions, which reinforced their mobility, reduced their action and field of maneuvering. So it didn't occur. So I would recall that it was the Camp Simpa attack, the latest, biggest.
Thank you, Emil. Now, General, it seems there's a conveyor belt that keeps producing foot soldiers for Al-Shabab. How does Al-Shabab recruit and radicalize individuals in the affected counties of Mandera, Wajir, and Garissa? Are there any specific patterns or tactics employed by the group in these recruitment efforts? How have they been able to sustain their strength after facing the United States and, the might of the AMISOM and also the regular armies of Somalia National Army and also Kenyan Defense Forces? Hello, General. Could you kindly unmute your device, please?
Thank you. I should mention that indeed the bulk of Al-Shabab still remain residents of Somalia. And the fact that what they have from Kenya is small. There has been recruitment in the past, in terms of the youth through Islamic training centers. And because of the hard conditions in the north, lack of employment, youth have been able to find their way there. But right now, with much more controls, much more engagement, much more preparations, we've been able to contain the youth, keep them within the country, and the numbers that go are actually small now, and most actually are known and identified, so that through intelligence, we're able to tell who are gone, their involvement, are they back, and all that. And the fact also that those who come back willingly have been treated very well, received very well, handled very well, and kept very well. In that way, therefore, further recruitment has been stopped, actually as much as is possible, and we feel that the numbers now from Kenya are very few, and things that we can actually deal with very well.
Thank you, General. Now, Emil, we often tout the phrase, African solutions to African problems, and that's why the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, and its successor, ATMIS, was formed. So to what extent has the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, been successful in countering Al-Shabab activities, and what are the challenges faced by its predecessor, ATMIS, in fulfilling its mandate? Why is it so difficult to degrade the capacity of Al-Shabab to a level where they are not able to carry out major attacks in Kenya or in Somalia or Tanzania?
Yeah, it also depends in the interoperability cooperation between ATMIS and US, UK, and other international forces which they are backing ATMIS forces. ATMIS forces, they limited also the movement of Al-Shabab because of the presence, and also with the cooperation with the SNA. And recently that we can saw also with the government change and the new president coming in the FGS, we saw quite a good number of successes where Somali National Army reconquered some major towns and also outposts which were before not able to do and take it back from Al-Shabaab. But then again, for the ATMIS and also regarding the FGS, the limitation is the social composition of the Somali society, which is still favorable for Al-Shabaab. And that's why, because you have the two parallel system of the government, that also you have the federal member states, which they have their own administration, which it's very complicated politically to have a consensus, which all the consensus is there to defeat Al-Shabaab and also to reinforce the rule of law in the whole of Somalia. But still, in this context, ATMIS also have been facing numerous challenges regarding the locals. When, for example, after an attack, ATMIS forces or AMISOM forces, they were shooting at locals, so which created grievances, which were not resolved, and it was turned against the forces, which they limited their action of the fulfilling of the mandate and stabilizing the situation. And of course, Al-Shabaab fully exploited with also propaganda and also with threats and also active recruitment, as His Excellency said, for the youth. And then this hindered AMISOM and ATMIS to fulfill and to stabilize, fully stabilize, and still leave some room of action for Al-Shabaab down in the southern parts of Somalia. But the biggest contribution for that, it was the KDF forces, which were deployed in the east, in the 4 regions of Kenya, and also with external help, that they really active, and they limited the cross-border incursions for Al-Shabaab.
Now, staying with you, Emil, talking about the KDF, the Kenyan Defense Forces, are they part of the ATMIS mission, or they operate independent of ATMIS?
So they are present. They are present because they are African Union members, member state, and also they were part of AMISOM missions. But during the relation and also what we had during the time between Somalia, so they are part and they are playing their active part, but they are playing mostly as KDF. They have seconded and very, very professional officers to the ATMIS mission, which are working in Mogadishu. But mostly the Kenyan Defense Forces, they are mainly acting in Kenya and also in the southern parts of Somalia, more or less independently, and in typical operation, then in coordination with other forces such as SNA or international participating members.
Thank you, Emil, for clearing the air on that. Now, back to you, General Muhammed. What are the primary challenges faced by security agencies in gathering intelligence and countering Al-Shabaab's operations in the region? Are there any structural or logistical obstacles that hinder their effectiveness? Emil did speak on the military side of it. Now, let's go deeper into the intelligence aspects of it. What are the obstacles?
I should mention that for a long time, we had been challenged in terms of intelligence until we were able to sit back, reflect, and find better ways of addressing the issues. And we found that the answer is not only for security forces to provide intelligence or through the National Intelligence Agency provide intelligence. We found that the best way is to win the hearts and minds of the people. So we went back down to the villages, spoke to the local elders, spoke to the people of the need of importance of security, importance of their own security, and importance of the nationality of Kenya, more so in the area of Lamu, down in the south, which has been a problem for a long time. And I can show you that with that engagement of the people and using the people as part of the system, we've been able to get very relevant information, both in terms of camps that are established in the Boni Forest, and in terms of people who are involved in those supporting those camps. And through that, therefore, and quite some time, those camps were cleared. People were able to be accepted. Those who were actually involved in that, who came out to give up, and indeed, sanity was brought and order was brought so that the people now are working with the security forces to ensure that there's no incursions of Al-Shabab into those areas. The same has been done up in the north, where through local administration and local elders, there's a lot of cooperation in terms of finding out anything about Al-Shabaab, information, possible attacks, and recruitment. And this has worked very, very well indeed, so that for quite a while, these areas have been very quiet, apart from what I may call isolated attacks over some time. Again, I should mention that part of the intelligence is indeed with our regional and international partners. And this has proved very useful in terms of what we share with them and what they share with us. And indeed, I can say confidently that in Kenya, indeed, Al-Shabaab is being brought very well under control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. A fine place to go on a break. When we return, we'll be looking at solutions to, stemming this resurgence of Al-Shabaab in northern Kenya. Do stay with us. This is Secure the Continent. We will be right back after this quick timeout. Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Secure the Continent, News Central Television. I've been discussing the latest attacks by Al-Shabaab in northern Kenya as 8 policemen were killed in a suspected attack. Still on the program with me, I have Emil Kovacs, a risk analyst and CEO of Risk Solution Africa, joining us from Bamako in Mali. I also have retired Brigadier General Ahamed Muhammed, a senior advisor, Defense and Security at the Horn Institute, joining live from Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Now, Emil, in light of the recent attacks on security officers, how does Al-Shabaab specifically target security forces and passenger vehicles in the attacks? Are there any identifiable trends or strategies employed by the group?
Yeah, it's mainly, as also His Excellency explained, it's small groups, mobile groups, which are targeting with hit and run, and mostly with IEDs. And then also time to time, they use the strategy with larger groups when they conduct, complex operations involving, suicide vehicles and multiple complex operations when they attack from multiple directions, and they storm, for example, as we saw it happen with the Ugandan ATMIS forces in Somalia. So basically, we didn't see a change of pattern of attacks, because now, as they were suffering losses lately, they go back to the basics, so to say, and they have conducted, this small hit and run. And we didn't see that much of a change of tactics. But of course, they are very, very dangerous, and then they can always adapt with new strategies.
Okay, thank you, Emil. Now, General Muhammad, this insinuation that, Al-Shabab might be getting support from locals. What evidence or indicators suggest that locals in Mandera, Wajir, and Garissa collaborate with Al-Shabab? And are there specific examples of such collaboration? And what motivates these individuals in the first place to work with the group?
Well, let me make it very clear that there's no cooperation between Al-Shabab and the major communities in Kenya. What we have is only elements who have been indoctrinated as individuals, who have been able to leave the country and join Al-Shabab. In terms of support on the ground in Kenya, that does not exist, either in the villages or the major towns. Therefore, what we have, as I said, is very clear. It is individuals indoctrinated who have gone there, or individuals who are in the country who try to recruit. But these were in the early days. As things stand now, the situation is very much under control. We have controlled recruitment, we have controlled indoctrination through our own ways, and we've been able to even get to know who are the boys who have been recruited. And those who have come back have been treated so well, that even those who are still there actually having the urge to come back if released by Al-Shabab.
Thank you, General. Now, Emil, what are the potential consequences for locals who choose to cooperate with Kenyan security agencies, Somali security agencies, to share information about Al-Shabab? Are there any protection mechanisms in place to safeguard these individuals from potential reprisals? What are the best global practices?
So yeah, it goes back to the practices of the intelligence agency, what kind of tactics they use, and also communication means to get in touch with that local informants or local sources, as we start to call them. But in case of Al-Shabaab, usually if they suspect anyone, they will just execute the person. They are very, very, very strict on it, and very ruthless. They don't allow and don't accept any treason, and also a collaboration from the areas which they control with any other forces like SNA or KDF. But here the protection mechanisms lie, it's very complex, and it cannot be explained. It's in an individual basis, and it's very, very, very delicate work.
Okay. Now back to you, General Muhammad. Is there any, we've talked about ATMIS and AMISOM on the program so far, but I want to know if there's any international support, a broader one, or collaboration in place to assist Kenya in its fight against Al-Shabab. How are regional and international actors cooperating to address the transnational threat posed by the group?
Well, let me put very clearly that much of the support is not really directly internal to the country. As we know, ATMIS or AMISOM in the past has got support from, it is an African Union mission, support from the EU, and of course the United States, and other countries that are willing partners have come in on board to assist in that regard. So within AMISOM or ATMIS now, that support is both in terms of the AU and partners like the EU and the US. In terms of Kenya, actually our fight has been very much nationalistic on our own, because the region, remember in the region, the two main targets, and refer the impact of Al-Shabab, is Kenya and Ethiopia. Kenya has had its share also, but Ethiopia, down in the southeast, has had its share of challenges for some time. So the only support we get so far is in terms of intelligence. On that regard, both in the region and internationally, that has been very promising and very, very useful as and when required. But internally, indeed, it remains a national effort, both for Kenya and Ethiopia. And I would say that so far, it has been handled very well, to the extent that in the north, is much more order now, is much more, people feel much more secure and much more control, apart from what you may call those single isolated cases. Thank you.
Now, staying with you, General, do you think this is a winnable war? And I mean, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you can't go to sleep with both eyes. So as long as Al-Shabab remains a threat from its source in Somalia, its neighboring countries would always be worried. Is this a winnable war to you?
Well, the big challenge is it a winnable war in Somalia before you come to Kenya and Ethiopia? That's where the issue is. You know, where are we winning that war in Somalia? And I should say that for Somalia, it remains a challenge. Al-Shabab will remain for some time. As long as they control territory, as long as we find weaknesses within ATMIS in terms of getting out of their bases to go and conduct preemptive attacks, as long as Al-Shabab is able to conduct massive attacks, what we saw being done on Ugandans a few weeks ago, that threat will remain for a time. That will require massive action. In fact, I'll say it requires action beyond the AU in terms of the international community coming in to try and contain that situation. As long as Somalia is unstable, there's no doubt that neighbors, Kenya and Ethiopia, will feel the impact of that instability. Our only worry is that if they're able to cross over beyond Kenya and Ethiopia, get into Tanzania, get into Uganda through other means, and also go down and join the ongoing conflict in Mozambique.
Yes. Thank you very much, General. Now, Emil, are there any efforts being made to address the root causes of Al-Shabaab's influence and recruitment in the region beyond military and security measures? And in addition to military and security measures, are there any comprehensive efforts being made to address to address the social, economic, and political grievances of this group? Is negotiation something that could be explored as a means to ending this conflict with Al-Shabaab?
No negotiations, because Al-Shabaab would not enter in negotiation unless, you know, Kenya and Somalia accept Sharia law. That is their that is their goal, to establish an emirate. So as regarding that, as you said, in a social economic context, yeah, it can be defeated, and there are quite considerable effort, not just beside military and operationally, to defeat them, but also to prevent them, so that they can actively recruit because of exploiting of the socio-economical situation. And also we have now other regional conflicts, which, for example, was in the Tigray region in Ethiopia, which is impacting, and also the Russian-Ukraine conflict, which was drawing attention away from Africa, or the conflict zones from Africa. And I think it's there now considerable effort from the international community, and also, as well, as I said also at the beginning, now with the new change of tactics for Kenya, to have this empowerment of national empowerment and take matter off their own hands and learn from past mistakes, which was with the previous administration. And I think in the long run now, Al-Shabab capability and also maneuver, it will be considerably reduced, because now, as we could have observed, they still have capability, but it's much more reduced, and also even in Somalia.
Thank you, Emil. Now, General Muhammed, how does Al-Shabaab's affiliation with Al-Qaeda impact its operations, objectives, and overall strategy? Are there any synergies or conflicts between the two groups' agenda? And does Al-Qaeda in any form provide material or financial support, or even recruitment to bolster Al-Shabaab? Is there any intelligence that points to that?
Well, in that regard, we can't rule out that most of the terrorist organizations have actually linkages in certain ways, and they also try and seek out each other. And therefore, for Somalia, there has been no doubt that a number of groups like Al-Qaeda have tried to influence what is going on there, along with others, and therefore it's not really a standalone activity. In the same token, Al-Shabab has also spread its feelers elsewhere to seek to provide support in those areas. So certainly, Al-Shabaab not acting alone, acting with others is a reality.
Thank you very much, General. Now, Emil, how can the international community, international partners and donor countries assist Kenya in terms of its efforts to combat Al-Shabab, both in terms of military support and capacity building for security agencies, as well as socio-economic development in affected regions? How could they come in to help, Kenya with this Al-Shabaab problem?
Yeah, for the international community, they have to continue support in both socially and also militarily. Because if, as Kenya approaches to take ownership and also the leadership, because it's a national issue and it's Kenya first, I think continuing support and giving, money and also equipment for KDF forces, it can make the difference against the fight for Al-Shabab. And even in Somalia with the same tactic, it can be easily eradicated if all efforts combined and there's no, political defaults, and we need to have political consensus also to succeed.
Now, General, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, I do know that you did speak to this point, but I want I want more details. You did touch on this issue, and I'm asking you if there are any specific strategies or programs in place by the Kenyan government to support the rehabilitation and reintegration of individuals who have been involved with Al-Shabab, particularly those who may be disillusioned or willing to disengage from the group.
Well, I want to make it very clear that that has been done very, very successfully. We have been able to get our administrators to receive those who are coming back and those who have surrendered willingly. And all those who have come back have been received well, have been reintegrated, and have been assisted in terms of settling down within their respective societies. And this has been very encouraging for those who are out there, because remember, a good number of them went there without understanding what the issues are, and they want to leave, but it has been very hard for them to leave. So because of the actions that have been done by the government so far, in terms of rehabilitation, those who have given up and come back, I can assure you that those who are still out there are making every effort to try and come back. So far, the centers that have been doing this, both in Nairobi and outside in the Northeastern, have done this very well. I know even our own institute has done very well in terms of absorbing those boys and trying to get them back in society. And this has been one of our key winning points in terms of winning the hearts of those who are still there, and done very well indeed.
Thank you very much, General. Now, Emil, as we wrap up, looking at the source of Al-Shabab, going back to Somalia, how much of a difference has the government of Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud made in the past year in its fight against Al-Shabab? Are they making progress, and do you see improvement in its fight against Al-Shabab?
Yeah, definitely. It was a change after the government came into power, and also the approach for different federal member states. There's much more dialogue and much more cooperation between them. We could have seen good advances on the field. And I'm very optimistic what is regarding even Kenya and also Somalia, because now also that President Biden and the United States sent back the forces and also committed much support for the effort of defeating Al-Shabaab, we can see and we can observe considerable gains.
What do you think made the difference?
Sorry?
What do you think made the difference this time around?
It's the lessons learned, and then I think also in the international community, as we saw in Africa, the recent changes that have occurred, and I think also that it's a better understanding with local ownership with the conflict and grievances between different social ethnicities, and also how to reconcile them. And I think combining this very, very strong, how to say, advantage, I think even Somalia and Kenya can succeed for ending this very long-lasting insurgency and very, very costly and also in human lives to eliminate the threat of Al-Shabaab in Somalia, in Kenya as well.
I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Emil Kovacs, Risk Analyst, CEO at Risk Solutions Africa, join us live from Bamako, Mali, and also Brigadier General Ahamed Muhammed, retired Senior Advisor at the Horn Institute in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show. I do appreciate your insights and your contribution to the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Now, the Kenyan government can protect itself from Al-Shabab militant attacks by strengthening intelligence gathering, ensuring implementing robust border control mechanisms, engaging communities to counter extremist ideologies, and enhancing military and law enforcement capabilities. These measures involve improving coordination between security agencies, investing in surveillance technologies, enforcing strict immigration policies, promoting social cohesion, and providing adequate training and resources to security forces. By adopting a multifaceted approach, the Kenyan government can enhance its protection against Al-Shabab. Thanks for watching the program. Remember to stay safe all the time. I am Gbenga Aborowa. See you next time on Secure the Continent. Bye-bye.